Hey everybody, it's Saturday morning. I thought I'd go live to test out my new setup and answer any of the questions that you have. So let's go ahead and get started and talk about why I have a new setup or why I need to test a new setup. Well, if you missed the last live stream, we're getting the house ready to sell because we're moving up to Seattle. So as part of that, I have to tidy up my desk, which means I had to go and sorry, being distracted, making sure that I'm not muted. But I have to clean up my desk, which means that the Rodecaster had to get packed up. So in order to keep being able to do live streams and create content, I need to go back to using the stuff that's already mounted in my desk. So for this setup, we've got the Dachman DA87SE. That's going into my Cranbourne Audio Camden Preamp. That is connected into the line inputs of my Universal Audio Apollo X8. In the X8, I am running the following software. We've got let me move this over. Actually, give me a second and I'll add this so I can share this with you. It'll take me a minute to get that set up. Actually, maybe not. Where am I? Let's set up a new scene. Let's add a screen share. Don't want to share the whole thing. Okay, so we've got one. Let's duplicate that. No, let's not duplicate. Let's copy and paste. We'll add plugin 2. So now let's undo that. Got one more. No, Matthew, it won't be too much of a pain, but it's not going to be a fun process. Let's put it that way. And just in case people are wondering what I'm talking about, Matthew Bliss just messaged me. Will it be a pain to move all the reverb panels you've got on the walls? The biggest pain is just that there's so many of them, but it shouldn't be too much of a pain to actually move them. Give me a second. I'm not sure where my second window went. Okay, there we go. So here are my 3 plugins I'm running right now. Come back. If I had more time and had actually planned this out, I would have already had these ready to go. Okay, so plugin number 1 is the NEAV DFC channel strip. On this one, I've got EQ on. I've got 2 EQ bands on. EQ2 set at 700 Hertz. We're cutting -4.1 dB. The Q is fairly wide at 0.5. The second band is the EQ, or the EQ set to 7.2 with a 2.4 cut, and the Q's even wider at 0.3. So the 700 Hertz is to cut some of the mud in my voice, and the EQ4 7K is to cut some of the high end. Next, we've got dynamic EQ. Actually, need to turn on the high pass filter on the Apollo, but the only thing in this section that is running is the dynamic EQ, which I've got set to 6K, level plus 13.8, which is actually a cut, and the Q is set fairly narrow at 10. This is essentially acting as a de-esser. We don't have the compressor or limiter on, and I have the expander and gate both on. So the expander helps push the noise floor a little bit down gently when I stop talking, and then the gate will completely finish that off if I'm on a live stream and just not talking. And then I don't have any input or output gain. So that's the NEAV DFC. That flows into the Manly Voxbox, which isn't really being used as a preamp, but unfortunately I can't bypass the preamp in this plugin. I'm using it for the compression. It's a 3-to-1 compressor. I've got the threshold set to max. We've got a set to medium fast on the attack, medium on release. Because I have such bad sibilance, I'm also using the de-esser in the Voxbox, set to 6K. Again, threshold set to max. We're not doing any EQ, and the transformer is in. And then the last plugin is just the limiter, and that's there. Let me move this so we can see it. Basically, the ceiling is set to negative 0.16 dB, and we're adding 12 dB of gain to bring this up to levels where you can actually hear me without having to crank your volume, because I do have a very quiet speaking voice. So that is my new setup. Not really, nothing in it is new, but it's a new processing chain. It's a new setup that I haven't used for quite a while. I think I actually stopped using this when my Apollo died, and I had to start testing the Rodecaster and the DLZ. So I'm back to where I started. A little bit of a different setup now that I've gotten used to having that noise gate on live streams. It really does help. And this feels really natural. You don't get any of that real jerky, chattering, opening and closing of the gate that you might get with typical gates, especially if you don't get it set up right. So for anybody watching out there, let me know how it sounds, but we'll go ahead and move on. Let's go back here. Okay, so it shows that I'm muted. I got some alert that I was muted, but it does not look like I'm muted. So moving forward, one thing I saw this week is that Riverside added a new feature so that you can now record 2 people in person with an audio interface. And this is something that has always required a bit of a workaround to make it work, because anybody who's ever recorded using Riverside or any kind of browser-based recording platform knows that the limitation has always been that the browser sums all of the inputs of your interface into a single channel, a single stereo output. Riverside has figured out a way to allow you to access 2 mic inputs on your audio interface. And right now that's the biggest limitation, is you can only access 2 of those inputs, and it's strictly inputs 1 and 2. So let me see if I can pull that up real quick. Let's see if I can get in there. Oh, apparently at some point Riverside got the .com. Put in riverside.fm because that's what it's always been. Okay, so we'll want to go to the studio. Okay, so this is taking a bit of a minute. Matthew says, would be interested to see the dual mic setup, especially for USB mics. It's not clear. I don't think. Let me pull it up to see what it looks like. Let's change this up or actually, we finally got this. No. Stupid browsers. Let's switch. This one I know I'm already set up in. I don't know why, if this is a Riverside thing, but it's just been taking forever to load everything up. At least the last couple days, but my computer has also been acting up. Come on. Let's move on. There we go. Okay, so what we do is we go into Add Participant. We now have an in-person guest option, and this is in beta. I'm not sure if it's rolled out to everybody or not, but if you don't have access to it, it is coming. So yeah, it doesn't look like we'd be able to use 2 different USB mics because it's only giving us options for an input that's tied to the audio interface we're using for the primary channel. So in this case, we'd have like my Apollo, and then we've got choices of input 1 and input 2. So hopefully at some point they end up giving us the ability to choose which inputs we use. And hopefully at some point we get the option to use USB mics. But until then, well, I guess we still have the issue that has existed with USB mics, and it's difficult for the computer to identify different types of mics, or when you have two of the same type of USB mic plugged in. So I think that would still continue to be a problem. But Zoom has fixed that solved that problem with their P2, which is a two input audio interface designed for USB mics. So you can plug that in to your computer's your interface, plug two USB mics in, and you're good to go. They really need to finesse the marketing. So much space for disappointment and overpromises with that kind of announcement, especially for their particular audience. And yeah, Riverside, that is probably one of my biggest pet peeves, is because their marketing goes so over the top in a time where people are kind of tired of that late 90s, early 2000s, just over the top. Use this because it's the greatest thing ever. That over the top marketing doesn't really work so well these days. And then he followed that up with, unless they are aiming high towards podcast teams or studios with budgets now, who is their target audience? I don't think their target audience is podcast teams or studios. That's probably always going to be a small part of their core audience, because let's face it, there aren't a ton of podcast studios out there. There aren't a ton of large teams out there or agencies doing podcast editing. And I can't remember how much it costs, but it's not exactly cheap going the business route with Riverside. LOL, MTV excitement, we'll call that. And yeah, that's the biggest thing, is at least Riverside has started calling out these things as being beta, because for a while they would release them with the same kind of marketing. Check out our new feature. And then you test it out, and it's just very bare bones. That's their business model. They'll release the MVP version of something, and then they take user feedback and start developing it into what the users want. And I do understand that approach, but it does also leave us a little frustrated as the user when we are given this tool that they say, look how cool these captions are magic captions, but we can't go in and change the fonts or change the spellings of words that are misspelled. So, hey, this is really cool, but this isn't really usable because I can't make the changes I want to. I guess that's one way of doing things. Then you have other companies who will just use Hindenburg as an example, who decide, okay, this is what we're building. We don't care what users want. We're doing our thing. If this doesn't work for you, oh well, too bad. So neither approach is great. Then, kind of related to that, but kind of not, is thinking about how people will compare the Mackie DLZ versus the Rodecaster. A lot of people talk about, well, the DLZ doesn't get firmware updates, but the Rodecaster gets a ton of updates. My view on that is probably a little bit different, in that I look at the DLZ as, in my mind, just a much better product. It's solid. It has everything I need. And they come from that old school world of mixers where you don't really need to update things because you build it really well from the very beginning with every feature that it needs. So you don't need to worry about firmware updates because everything's already there. If there's a firmware update, it's probably to fix little bugs in software if it exists. And these days, there's usually some kind of programming going on inside of pretty much every product. Rodecaster, they've had to use updates to continue to add in things that they develop. I'm not saying that that's a bad thing, but it's also not something that is absolutely needed. Mackie DLZ has had a fraction of the firmware updates, and from what I can tell, they've been kind of boring, minor things. But nothing that the Rodecaster has added has really given me anything new. The biggest one was virtual channels, which you needed in order to route audio to different places within the Rodecaster. I haven't run into the need for anything like that in the Mackie because everything's already there. So that's something to think about when you hear people talk about, well, Rodecaster's better because it's continually upgraded or developed. That might be the case, but ask yourself, how many of these new features do you really need? Or are these kind of, hey, we need to keep putting in new updates because people are so used to kind of the cell phone upgrade every year. I guess Macs are doing that now. We've got the new series each year. People are so used to, we need more things added to what we use, or we get bored. I don't know. And I think I kind of lost my train of thought there, but the bottom line is with the Zoom P4 coming out, or the Zoom P4next, I think we're going to see a lot of discussion about Zoom P4next versus Rodecaster versus the DLZ creators. Which one is best for podcasting, or which one is the best for me to use? And it's really going to come down to price. If you're on a limited budget of $200, you're not going to find anything better than the P4next. Rodecaster and the Mackie DLZs, they're at a different price point, and you get a lot more for that. They're not built the same way that the Zooms are. Matthew and I talked about this on our last stream, that Zoom builds things to a price point. So they look at, what can we add into this and sell it for $179? So they try to cram as many new features as they can and look at, okay, where can we cut costs to be able to add in these fancier features? With the first version of the P4, they cut corners by limiting it to 16-bit 44.1 ADC. That's really limiting when you're recording. It's fine for playback, but that extra headroom you get recording at 24-bit is very useful. I'm sure there might be some corners cut in the P4next. We won't know until it's out in the wild. But I don't think it's going to be a Rodecaster killer. If anything, it might kill off the Tascam Mixcast 4. I could see it doing that because Tascam never really gained any market traction. And I think a big part of that is, especially in the podcasting space, people, for one reason or another, gravitate to whatever came onto the market first. Blue Yeti comes to mind. The Rodecaster comes to mind. The P4 comes to mind. P4 was the first one, and it's actually probably the only sub $200 4-in, 4-out. 4-out as in 4 headphone out portable podcast recorder. But let's see. Matthew just picked up a Rodecaster Duo to get into the game a bit more. Hopefully it's not too late in the game to grab one, i.e. Rodecaster Pro 3. Honestly, I don't think you have to worry about a new Rodecaster coming out. I think the reason, at least what I've read and heard online, is the reason for the Rodecaster 2 and the Duo was that the original Rodecaster, the chip they put in it was too limiting. They hit that limitation pretty quickly and couldn't continue to build what they wanted to. So the Rodecaster 2 came out with a much more capable chip that should allow them to continue developing for years to come. At least that's what I've heard. And I think we can also look at the fact that they put out the Rodecaster video. I think that if they were really considering doing a Rodecaster 3, that would have probably been a higher priority since that's their flagship product before trying to push a video device. And I do wonder about the viability of the Rodecaster video, because who was it? YOLObox a few months ago put out their YOLObox Extreme, which has like 4 or 5 HDMI inputs that are all 4K. And that was one of the big things I had with the Rodecaster video, is it was 1080. And I know a lot of people out there will say, well, 1080 is fine for podcasting. Yeah, it's fine for podcasting, but my approach is I want to capture as much or the highest quality content I can so that I'm future-proofing myself. Because upscaling video doesn't look as good as if we natively captured it at that resolution. So trying to up-res 1080 to 4K isn't going to look as good as if we recorded natively in 4K. So that's one of the things that's really held me off from even considering the Rodecaster video. And that's because I was waiting to see if somebody put out something that was 4K compatible. But of course, Windows 10 is the last operating system Microsoft ever released. Okay, I'm not a Windows person, so I can't comment on that. Yeah. I feel for you, Windows users. It just doesn't work for me. And then he said, I definitely saw YOLObox and wondered why Rodecaster video was the most attractive. There can't be more in there that adds an advantage over others. I think Rodecaster video is the most attractive because, at least for podcasters, because the Rodecaster and Rode already have that reputation in that space. YOLObox is more known in the live streamer space. So I think YOLObox might be more attractive to streamers than it would be to podcasters, but that's just a guess. I don't think there's really... Well, I think the one thing the Rodecaster Video has over the YOLO box is the audio processing. Having a Rodecaster Duo essentially built into the Rodecaster Video is one advantage. And that's probably the biggest advantage it has over any of the other video switchers on the market, because all of the rest of them, I don't think any of them have XLR inputs. If they do, they are probably micro XLR, and the preamps in those devices are just terrible. That's why when people ask, well, should I just plug my Rodecaster into my camera and record everything there because it'll make things easier? No, you don't want to do that, because the preamp in your camera is just thrown in there. It's garbage. You don't want to record to it, just like you don't want to record your audio directly into the Blackmagic ATEM. Their preamps are not good. Keep the audio separate. Use the best device for each thing. The Rodecaster is going to be built for audio. It's going to have the best audio quality compared to a camera or a switcher, unless it's a Rodecaster and already has that built in. Let's see. Another thing I wanted to talk about is I found this a few months ago. I think Production Expert did a review of it. It's somehow popped back onto my list of things to check out. Let me pull that up. Come on, computer. Yeah, something's going on with my computer. Everything's really slow. There we go. Noiseworks DynAssist. From everything I've seen and read about this, it's very similar to Sonible's approach to stuff, except this one runs on ARA, so you don't have to train it, and it sees the entire audio file you're working on. I think probably the one thing that's really held me off on actually checking it out is something in me tells me that Hindenburg does not support ARA, and probably never will, because that's something audio engineers need. That's not what podcasters and radio people need. But there are advantages to it. But looking more at the plugin, let me pull up the window. Why can't I find it? Okay. No, that's not it. Give me just a second to find my window. Okay, that's really weird. I have the window open, but it does not seem to be anywhere on my system. So let's try this. Okay, so now I've got it open. Let me change this. Okay. So, Dynasyst. The fastest way to edit vocals and dialogue. Levels the gain over your entire vocals, detects breaths and sibilants and shows them at a glance, removes unwanted pauses with the content-aware Vox gate. I don't think it actually removes the unwanted pauses. I think it is just a gate. Seamless integration with ARA and no latency. And if you buy it for Black Friday sale, it's $99 and you get their gain aim free. So gain writing with infinite look ahead. Dynasyst adjusts the loudness to the target loudness and LUFS integrated. Thanks to infinite look ahead enabled by ARA, pumping artifacts are prevented. This was a common problem with previous vocal writers. Additionally, Dynasyst ensures minimal CPU load with zero latency, ensuring your workflow is not disrupted by playback delays at any time. It has an AI-powered Vox gate, which works based on voice activity to remove pauses and silence, eliminating the need to set an additional threshold. This method also prevents the accidental cutting off of the first or last syllable, which is a common issue with existing gates due to incorrect gate opening and closing. And that's one of the reasons I've always been against using traditional gates for podcast production. And to prevent voice bleeding, use the loudness cutoff. Most precise breath detection. The AI-powered breath detection is more precise than any other solution on the market. That's great marketing, but does it actually work? It ensures that every clip has well-leveled breaths, eliminating the need for manual editing. So in the interface waveform, we can see over here the breaths are highlighted in a lighter gray, making it easier for you to review the clip without having to listen to the entire file. And that does help, being able to visually see where the breaths are so you can QC them to really listen to how well it's working. It also has sibilance detection, and the feature works as you would expect. Detects and levels sibilance that exceeds the threshold you set. And similar to the deep breath, the sibilance is shown in a lighter gray so you can see where it is. This is, like I said, on my list of things to check out, because if it does what it does, it would be really good to have all of these features in one plugin. To have writing, let's see. Yeah, dialogue, writing, a noise gate for the voice, breath and sibilance control all in one. Yes, sign me up. If this works as well as it can, that would be a huge thing for podcast producers. So again, that's Noiseworks Audio, Dynasyst. And yeah, that's definitely something to check out, because I'd much prefer to use a leveler or a writer over compression. I'm really sensitive to compression, and being able to use less compression, I think, is a benefit for podcasts. Got a couple more comments. House of Jen, good to see you. It has been a while. We're checking out, right now, it's Dynasyst by Noiseworks Audio, which is kind of a smart plugin, similar to the Sonable plugins I've talked about. it does leveling and writing. It has a noise gate that's based on the audio. Since it runs on ARA, it can scan the entire file, so it knows what's there. So instead of having to deal with a gate and figuring out the attack and release, it knows automatically when the audio is going to start, so it can automatically open and close when it needs to. It does breath detection and reduction, and it has a de-esser or sibilance reducer as well. And that's on sale for $99 right now. And it's good to hear from you. It has been a while, and a couple other things that we've talked about on this stream is talking about mixers like the P4next Zoom just announced versus the Rodecaster and the DLZ. Talked about Riverside adding a new feature where you can record two people in person through an audio interface, and then kind of testing out my new setup, which is without the Rodecaster or DLZ. It's my mic into a preamp into my interface, and then I'm running a couple of channel strips and a limiter. So if any of that stuff interests you, feel free to go back and watch the replay. Matthew, tools like this are great for editors to make their stuff easier. Whoop. And I'm going to make the shift to Reaper soon. Hopefully might look to these to build out my kit. What are you using right now? If I can't remember offhand, were you using Audition? I know I want to say you're in the Adobe space. But yeah, tools like that are what make our lives easier as podcast editors, because in a perfect world, we'd be manually writing the gain, using clip gain, all of that stuff. But we're not getting paid the kinds of money that TV show editors are making. We just aren't doing that kind of work. We're churning out content. That's what we do. I know some people might disagree with that, but that's what a podcast editor is. We're just churning out content for our clients. They don't pay us very well for that. They definitely don't pay us well enough to go through and manually do all of this work, manually adjusting each piece of the dialogue, each sentence or even word. They aren't paying us to go through and manually reduce each sibilant or each plosive. We need tools like this to help us be able to go through and make the mixing, make the cleanup, the leveling, all of that stuff as easy as possible. That's why I've been leaning on the Sonable plugins so long. I mean, I've been using those for, 2 or 3 years now, I think. And they have shaved a huge amount of time off my process. And I've talked about that in a bunch of videos. And even on live streams. But, I mean, this one stands out because it combines... I don't have anything that does breath detection. I've been doing that manually as needed. But I'm also one of those people that doesn't freak out about breaths, because if you pay attention when you're listening to a podcast, once you get really absorbed into what's being talked about, your brain tunes out most of those breaths, if not all of them, because we're exposed to breathing all the time. Some people breathe louder than others. There's going to be times where there's some really distracting breath. That needs to be cut out or turned down one way or another. But your typical breathing, that's normal. Our brains tune that out. But I think the biggest issue is when you have people recording podcasts with mics that are not positioned well, where it's sitting right in front of them, so every time they breathe, it goes right into the top of the mic. That's where something like a breath reduction tool really comes in. So that's why I'm really interested in this one. And yeah, if I could not have to use a compressor to level everything, because I'm using the Sonable Smart Compressor as my compressor and leveler. If I could get rid of the compressor altogether, that would be great. I hate compressed dialogue. I just do. This doesn't seem to do anything for plosives, which I'll just have to test it out to see if it fits into my workflow or not. Matthew said, yeah, well, let me backtrack. He does use Adobe Audition, aka the Money Bonfire. Yes and no. I don't really see value in Audition on its own, but the stuff that Adobe is doing with AI right now, they're adding a ton of value to those Adobe subscriptions. If you've got the, whatever it is, the Adobe Cloud that gives you all access to all of that, for anybody who does graphics or video work, that AI stuff is going to be well worth the subscription. Then he followed that up with, yeah, I saw a short where an editor was complaining about harsh breaths and said, if you're not using deep breath, are you even a podcast editor? Wasn't a fan of that. Yeah, I think one of the things a lot of podcast editors do is we get so fixated on listening for every little thing. We listen for these micro distractions or not even really distractions, but anything that's imperfect. And we focus on that. But that's not how people listen to podcasts. We don't need to be, to my ears, a lot of the deep breath plugins that I've used, they don't sound natural. They just completely mutilate breaths. Especially if you're using something old school like a Waves plugin, Isotope RX. Those are older technologies. I think that using AI, neural networks, machine learning, whatever you want to call it, whatever they're using, some form of those are going to start making it easier for developers to create deep breath plugins that can actually go in and see where a breath is instead of guessing. Because I'm going to assume that something like Waves Deep Breath is looking for using something like a threshold, looking for audio that's quieter than the main program material. Just a guess, but my advice has always been for podcast editors is to listen like a podcast listener would. Let's not focus on every imperfection. Let's stop trying to remove every breath or reduce the level of every single breath if it's not a distraction. Let's stop trying to Frankenstein words together. I think it was House of Jen. What was it? Frankenbits? Frankenbites? Something like that. But yeah, let's stop trying to do that. Let's stop trying to make everything perfect, because especially with the rise of AI and text to voice generated audio, generated dialogue, we need those imperfections. We need the imperfections of human speech to really kind of stand out, because in a place where perfect audio is getting easier to have, that's going to be the thing that people listen for. This is too perfect, it sounds like AI. I know, Matthew, you'd talked about an incident where you did voiceover for a client and they came back to you saying that, well, we really like this, but we're not pleased that you used AI for this. We were hoping you would do this yourself or something like that. That's the world we're in right now. In House of Jen, while it's good to know how to do manually, anything that speeds up workflow for this work helps, as most of the time it's small companies and individuals who need fast turnaround and for it to be passable. And that's exactly it. That's the kind of churn we're dealing with. We're working on, and not just that, but the clients we have, they don't have big budgets. And even if they do, most of the time they don't see the value in hiring someone who's going to, they just don't want to pay for the highest quality. They're more than happy to pay somebody next to nothing who will go out of their way to provide perfect. But that person wasn't, but that client isn't, or that editor is not getting paid well for all of that extra work that they're doing, all of that above and beyond. If your client wants above and beyond, charge them for that. If they're not willing to pay for above and beyond, we need these tools to be able to standardize everything and just crank stuff out just like the clients want us to. Matthew Bliss on the story I just tried to retell. I'm terrible with that, with memory and trying to retell things, but it was the students of the person I did the VO for that tried to claim I was AI. The podcaster was happy with it though. So, but that's the thing, that's the world we live in now. People are looking for anything to say that right there, that's AI. You used an M dash. That must have been written by AI. You used this type of structure, so you must have used AI. There's certain things that AI is trained on because everybody does it. We need to, I hope there's ways for things to be identified as AI so people can just know right away whether something is or isn't, rather than everybody trying to guess and label things that are done really well as AI when it was just done by someone who knows what they're doing. I mean, AI is good for a lot of things, but I think people are so used to people seeing stuff done by people who are do-it-yourself or don't really know what they're doing, that they can't believe that someone can create something that sounds that good without it being AI. And I just read an interview from one of my favorite musicians who just put out an album, Daniel Ash. He's got a new band called Ashes and Diamonds, and he was talking about AI and that you don't want to use AI to replace creativity, but use AI to allow you to enhance and expand your creativity. And he was talking about this in terms of people working on his videos that they've been releasing and how they've leaned into AI. And I mean, there's one thing is it's cheaper for a band to get a video produced using AI than to hire someone to do an entire music video. I mean, music videos used to be big budget things. Small-time bands, they don't have budgets for that. So being able to do something really creative using AI that just was financially impossible to do, or literally impossible to do because it couldn't be done without AI. So, I mean, that's what I try to stress to everybody is don't worry about using AI as long as you're using it to enhance your creativity. Don't rely on it as a crutch or as a means to make up for lack of skill in something. Don't lean on AI to be your writer if you don't understand what good writing is. Don't use AI to do your editing if you don't know what good editing sounds like. Because then you're at the mercy of the AI. You're only going to be as good as the AI. A good example is all of the podcasters who are using Descript go in there, tell it to remove filler words, shorten gaps, and then they think they're done. You listen back, you hear all of the bad cuts, you hear breaths that are cut off, and they think, this sounds great. But you listen to it, and anybody who's listened to well-edited audio is going to say, yeah, sorry, this does not sound great. And that's why I recommend, and I think House of Jen, yeah, that's what she said that brought this all up. While it's good to know how to do manually, anything that speeds up workflow, and that's what it's all about. If we can speed up our workflow using AI, that's great, but don't lean on it as a crutch. I see it like when the switch from tape to DAW happened. It's a tool we need to sort how to use so we don't get steamrolled out of jobs because our head is in the sand about it. And that's exactly it. There are so many editors who have their head in the sand. There are so many. I mean, Tara and I were just talking about this last night. There are so many people who have been saying for years, well, AI is not good enough to replace me. If you look at all of the companies cutting jobs, all of the people who have been struggling to find jobs over the last year, a lot of them are in marketing, they're in creative fields, they're developers, coders, people who have traditionally been in positions where their knowledge has been what has helped them stand out. And now AI is coming in and replacing them. Well, AI is not really replacing them. People who know how to use AI to do those jobs are replacing people who don't know how to use AI because it comes down to efficiency. If one person can do the work of 2 people over a month because they're using AI and they're able to turn stuff around faster and to a higher level, you're going to see people lose jobs. So if you're an editor, do not just go through this phase of the editing journey. Trying to think of a way to put that, but drawing a blank. But basically, get your head out of the sand, start playing with the different things that are out there to see if there are efficiencies that can be made. Like I started looking into Descript and Riverside, because over the course of this year, I've talked to a number of prospects who are really interested in working with me until they get the price. With video, things take a little more time. There's a lot more work to be done manually, especially in terms of shorts and stuff like that. We cannot compete with all of the other editors out there if we're doing everything manually. So I've had to look into ways of speeding up the process on the audio, or not the audio, on the video side. Let's see, where was I going with that? That's not to say that we don't also offer the premium video editing services to clients who want that. But for the clients who want cheap and fast, we have to learn how to use tools that allow us to be able to deliver cheap and fast, because the number of clients who are willing to pay that premium for professional high-end video work, they're going away. Just like the number of clients who are willing to pay a premium for the highest quality audio are going away, because they're either finding cheaper editors who can produce the same kind of quality at lower prices, or they're just hiring people and bringing it in-house. If you're a company, why are you hiring a podcast editor when you already have someone on staff who can handle all of that stuff? Or you can bring somebody in who can handle your audio and video work. They can handle shorts. There's no reason to keep paying an editor when, and it's weird to say this, but so many companies are just now realizing the importance of having video as part of their marketing strategy. It seems like YouTube's been around forever and companies have been using it. But with everything that's gone on over the last 5 years or so, the rise of TikTok and Shorts, Reels, all of that stuff, companies are going more and more into video as a big part of their marketing strategies. So we're seeing fewer and fewer of those companies hiring freelance editors. So there's going to be a lot more competition for that middle segment of podcasters. And unfortunately, that means we have to be able to compete a little more on price and on turnaround time. And I think that got a little long-winded, but that's where I'm at. It's been a really rough year for me as a podcast editor. We've talked to a number of promising clients, and like I said, every single one of them, when they get the estimate, when we talk price, that's when they say, yeah, that's more than we can spend, or worse, they just ghost us after having really great talks. I mean, we talked to one company who, they were really interested in us. He said he was fine with the price when we talked about it. We sent the proposal over, and then he just completely disappeared. He was really excited about working with Tara and the ideas she could bring to overhauling his podcast or their podcast and achieving the goals he had lined out, but just completely disappeared. Well, we have to find an editor who can handle this before we can start talking about the strategy. Okay, well, we do editing. Let's talk about what you're looking for specifically. We can get you a price. Nothing. So that's been my experience. I know Matthew has had a little bit of a different experience. I know he's picked up a few clients this year. Me, I'm sitting where I was at the beginning of the year. I haven't lost anybody, but I haven't gained anybody either. And that's why I've been leaning into AI and figuring out how we can use that as another avenue for generating business for our company. So if anybody has any last questions, go ahead and ask them now. Otherwise, I'm going to start wrapping up because my voice is getting a little bit sore. I'm still waking up, and it's about time for me to eat some breakfast. So if no one has anything else, we'll say talk to you later, but I'll give you a couple of minutes. So go ahead and ask away if you've got anything. Matthew says, in fairness, I think I'm hitting my Goldilocks zone. I don't have all my clients paying my ideal rate, but any new ones are. So yeah, I'm just intermediate professional at the moment. No, if you're getting paid and you have what you'd say is your Goldilocks zone, you're not an intermediate professional editor. You are a professional editor. Don't diminish yourself, because I've heard your podcasts. I've heard your work. You are a professional. You get paid to edit. There are so many editors out there who aren't actually editors. So yeah, don't diminish yourself because you think you have to be at a certain place to call yourself, to remove that intermediate from your title. If you do good work and clients are paying you and they're happy with the work that you do, you're a professional editor. Whether it's a part-time thing, a side hustle, or you're doing it full-time. In my mind, you can be a professional editor who works with 1 or 2 clients on the side. That's just the way I see it. There might be others who look at it as, well, you have to have a team or this many clients to look at yourself as a professional editor. I don't label things that way. Professional relates to the quality of the work that you do and how happy your clients are. That's all there is to it. You have one client who loves your work and your work is good, you're a professional editor. If you're using Descript and leaving it as is and you're calling yourself an editor, maybe not. But if you're using Descript as part of your process, and then you go through and you clean up all of the places where it made bad cuts, or you're using it in different ways other than the editing itself, you could still be a professional. It's about what you do, how you do it, and ultimately how happy your clients are with your work. But I think that's a good place to... Actually, thanks, man. I'll just stick with professional then. Wait until we talk about the coaching I'm talking about, though. Okay, that'll be interesting. Let's talk about that on the side. But thank you, everybody, for watching. Thank you, Matthew. Thank you, House of Jen, for participating. It always helps with live streams to have somebody to talk to. But thanks for watching, and we'll talk to you next time.